medical wise, I'm a dum dum. Like that explained how like we came about these medical findings that you know the uterus and cervix are kind of play a role in all this other stuff, and like how we learned that even the cervix is what stops sperm. Like how did we learn that if we didn't study women, and like what came about with that like discovery that oh there's a barrier between the baby maker and the vagina, like
Hmm.
I mean, I think part of the things that you guys are missing is the point that like before like obstetrics and gynecology was a profession or was a thing, which really, 100 years ago at most,
hmm.
it was midwifery models of care. So it was women-led um, women's health.
Oh, I had no
Uh,
idea.
yeah,
Okay.
so I mean, and so midwifery we often think of as like pregnancy care, birth, things like that. But even in modern days, like a midwife can do your pap smear. Like they can prescribe medication. They can, you know, put in an IUD. They can do kind of everything the only difference currently, I mean, in modern practice, that a midwife is different than an obstetrician or a gynecologist is that a gynecologist is a surgeon.
Yeah.
Right.
Really the only difference. So if you don't need surgery, then you don't need a gynecologist.
So
For women's health in general, whether it's before pregnancy, fertility, with pregnancy, postpartum, menopause, like you don't ever need to see a gynecologist in your entire life if you don't want to.
I mean, the same is true now. I know that my
Hmm.
OBGYN office gives me the option to choose a midwife over an
Hmm.
OBGYN. But like, is there like a shift that's like ended like midwifery as the standard care and going into like a
Oh,
gynecologist?
absolutely.
Like, when
I
did
mean,
you?
and it was the obstetrical community and the medical community shunning midwives and creating smear campaigns against them, as like we're doctors, we're scientists, we know what we're doing, you don't know what you're doing, you're killing people, you're stealing babies, you're from the old country and putting hexes on people and things like that. And so
Wow.
there was a huge smear campaign, especially at the turn of the century, 1900s, early like 1920s, things like that, where um, hospital models of care became um, the norm. And it was because before that everybody had their babies at home, um, with a midwife, and so they wanted to push people into the hospital to have babies, and so they did a huge smear campaign against midwives as like, you know, the old crone from the old country that is going to steal your baby and um, you know, curse you or whatever. Um, and you're going to die and you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And so there was a huge push against midwifery and made it illegal in some states. And some states, what's called lay midwives are still illegal, which means like the only way you can practice midwifery is like legally is by having you go to school, you get a nursing degree, and then you go to grad school for 3 years. I believe it's 3 years to a postgraduate program to a midwifery program,
Wow.
and that's
That
yeah.
sounds like
And so
that's a
even if
lot
you're
of
like
respect.
trained, like you're an apprentice, so to speak, because I mean midwifery, just like just about everything, was apprenticeship model. Um, and so currently the apprenticeship model um, is like no longer accepted as a valid form of midwifery care in most places.
Which blows my mind because a lot of people learn by doing and observing rather than learning in a
Hmm.
book.
Absolutely.
I think it's more practical to have some sort of apprenticeship for any sort of medical profession because
Mm.
you can only learn so much through a book. Patient care, bedside manner, things like that. You're
Yeah,
not going to learn in a classroom.
yeah, and that's why I mean medical degrees now at this point, you're doing residency, you're doing internships, you're doing kind of stuff like that. So you're still getting some of that after your education. Like I had to do clinical rotations and things like that for years. Um, but um, Yeah, I mean, some of the people that I've learned the most from are like lay midwives and doulas who literally say like, you can learn everything in the book, but you really like learn by like sitting at the feet of women and just like watching them, like watching what they're doing and, yeah.
Right. Um, and with watching and whatnot, I feel like I don't know if you'll know this, Pat. The birthing techniques, the standard position we are now in, on laying on our backs with our feet in
Hmm.
stirrups. I feel like wasn't that created? Is maybe this wasn't that created by some king that had some fetish with watching birth?
That's what
Yeah,
I read too.
yeah, I mean that's the like that's the rumor that like every I mean, I don't know positive if it's like
Oh
I
my
can't confirm
god.
100%, but like that's what I've heard, that's what's been like confirmed to me by a lot of people. But yeah, there was a king who was really like he just really liked to watch his like babies being born. And so the best way to um
Get a view.
get a view is like on your back, legs up. And then it became because they were royalty, then it became like,
The gold
ooh, this is what
standard.
you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and there's a lot of like history of royalty doing all sorts of weird, crazy medical stuff, and then like the other nobility being like, oh, I have to be just like the king and queen, so like now I'm gonna adopt this thing because then I'll seem
So
like I'm
weird.
high. Yeah, there's one medical history podcast I listened to. They were talking about this king who had like an anal fistula, and then it became like popular culture to like get an anal fistula,
Oh
like
my
like
god.
medically induced, like that kind of like because it was just like, oh, that's what the king like, you know what I mean? Yeah, like all sorts of crazy stuff, and then it evolved into like a common practice obstetrically, like birthing wise, because um it's easier for the doctor to view. And so now it's less than like it was previously, but it became like I'm the doctor, you're the woman, you don't know what you're talking about. I know what I'm talking about. So like I need to be able to see what you're doing. It doesn't matter how comfortable you are, it doesn't matter this, it doesn't matter that. I need to be able to see because I'm the one that's doing this. You're not the
Mhm.
one that's doing this. And so the
Which is
practice of laying
crazy.
on the back became the gold standard, it became the norm. Even though we know physiologically you're compressing the sacrum up when you're laying on your back, so it narrows everything, it changes the position of the hips. And then like babies' head shapes are different, your pelvis shape is different than like everybody else's, and so different birthing positions for different babies for different pelvis shapes is better than the other. There's really only one good thing laboring on your back or like pushing on your back, especially, is good for, and that's when the baby's like stuck above the pubic bone. And that's actually um, the technique that I'm familiar with that is called like the Ina May Gaskin technique, which is actually coined after a very famous midwife who runs like this place called The Farm that's in Tennessee or Kentucky or something like that. And it's this giant farm that's basically like this commune where people come and like have like give birth. Um,
Oh,
Hmm.
and it's yeah,
that's
it's
That
super
interesting.
sounds
cool.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like being on your back, you're working against all sorts of things like your tailbone
Hmm.
and gravity,
Hmm.
and like as someone who had to lay on their back and give birth to a 10-pound child, I would have
Hmm.
much rather been on my hands and knees.
And
Oh,
that's less
absolutely.
painful, right? Being on your hands and
Yeah.
knees.
I mean, yeah, for the most part, and especially like a lot of people will experience back labor, which is like you'll feel cramping, you'll feel a lot of pressure in your tailbone or like on your back, and that's oftentimes baby positional issue. But yeah, pulling like let gravity pulling the baby's head off your tailbone can help with that a lot. And even if
Oh,
you have like an epidural or like IVs and all kinds of things, and they're telling you like, well, you can't stand, you can't do this, you can still roll on your side. You can always give birth on your side, which has its other problems too, like compressing the pelvis sideways. But it's better than being on your back. Um, yeah, and I mean, we don't necessarily have to get into it because this is more about like periods and stuff like that. But um, like the whole pushing stage in general is a myth. the
Oh yeah,
the like the
people in
the
comas.
entire act of like you physically like down bearing pushing this baby out because somebody's telling you do it right now and like hold your breath and do this. All of that stuff is garbage.
People in
Like
comas can have
we
babies
still
without
do
pushing.
it.
So yeah,
Yeah, we
you're
still do
absolutely
it.
right.
Yeah, there's
This is why I
plenty
said
of.
sometimes modern medicine can be total trash, and this
Oh,
is one of
absolutely.
them.
And we're slowly moving away from it, and but it's like there's things that it's called like open glottis pushing, which is like when you like hold your breath, you're closing your glottis or your part of your throat. But open glottis pushing is like basically like moaning, like as you're pushing, and that's better because when you're holding your breath, you're tightening your pelvic floor, you're tightening your perineum, which is the
Oh.
last thing you want when you're pushing.
Yeah.
And you're trying to like get a baby out, and so like letting like vocalization like relaxes the pelvic floor, allows things to move better. And then there's plenty of case studies of women in comas, quadriplegics and paraplegics having vaginal births, and they don't have nerve control over that area, or they're not even conscious and they have vaginal births. And then also some women with like heart conditions, certain blood pressure things, certain like eyes, like blood pressure issues with the eyes, they're not allowed to push because like they don't want to increase that like pressure,
Oh.
and they still have vaginal births.
Yep.
Is it also less tearing too? Like less damage?
Absolutely, yeah, because
Okay.
so like for the most part, not pushing will on average take longer, quote unquote, but it's because like so baby comes down and then it comes back up a little, and then it comes down, and then it comes back up again. And in the vagina, you have the tissue, like the folds are called rugae, and it's like an accordion, and they're shortened, and so actually the vaginal canal lengthens, and like it creates that like that pleating goes away, and it opens up, and so but that doesn't necessarily happen super fast.
Yeah.
It like takes slow like relaxed stretching to open that tissue up, and so it theoretically it takes longer to like get baby out once baby's already like descended into the vagina, but there's usually less tearing, the recovery is usually better. Yeah, there's less like deformity in the skull and things like that, and then
I'm going to say two things, and then I'm going to switch the topics. One, only Pat Boswell could make birth sound much more fun and less painful. I swear. Like every
right.
time you talk about birth, I'm like, man, I should have another baby.
Right? I mean, but that's the thing is that like it's supposed to be this like it's supposed to be this empowering you're allowing your body to like do something that it never does in any other scenario. And you hear like I don't know if you have, but like there's stories of women that like have orgasms during birth, and they
Oh my
like
goodness.
these kind of things, and it's supposed to be this kind of like psychedelic out of body experience, like but everything we do in birth at this point, like
It intervenes, and we
yeah,
intervene
like
too
makes
much.
that more difficult. You can't have a psychedelic experience if somebody's yelling in your ear to like do something, or like you know what I mean, like you can't have that transcendent moment if you're being told what to do constantly, and you're being guided, and you're being pushed here and pulled here, and like things like that. And so not necessarily that like there isn't danger inherent in it, there isn't like a percentage of failure based evolutionarily and things like that, that like um it's not 100% of the people, but most research that's been done for a long time, and even the WHO, the World Health Organization, recommends that a cesarean rate between 10 and 15% is all that's needed. Anything more than that is dangerous. Anything less than that is dangerous. In the United States, I think our average is about 33,
which is ridiculous,
in any one given year. So
And people's hips
Yeah.
are actually getting smaller because of it. That's what from my understanding, because of the amount of cesarean sections, people don't genetically are having smaller hips, which is causing
Really?
more
Yeah.
problems in
Yeah.
birthing.
Yeah, because it's, I mean, and it's the same thing in fertility too. So I do a lot of fertility, IUI, IVF, things like that. And it's the same thing in fertility where like evolution has built in a certain amount of failure, which, for better or worse, we've negated at this point through the use of,
Natural
fertility.
selection means nothing
Yeah.
now.
Yes, yeah, like through fertility procedures, through cesarean sections, where like previously the woman or the baby or whatever would die during childbirth, or they wouldn't be able to get pregnant anyway and pass on those genes. Now, because of cesarean sections, we're able to birth those babies, which is great. But it's also passing on these genes that were meant to be like self-limiting. Yeah, and so that's why, especially in my opinion, cesarean rates and fertility rates will never go down below a certain threshold, and it will only like slowly increase. I don't know what the increase would be. Is it like 0.1% every 10 years? Is it I have no idea, but
Well, I
yeah,
mean, it does save for when it is necessary. It does save women's lives. I think
Yes.
that's
oh,
I think
absolutely.
it's a good
No,
thing.
and that I mean, and that's the thing that's important is like, I'm not saying any of this stuff is bad.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that this is what it is. Like, this is the facts that like
Mhm.
we are.
We might become a society that can no longer get pregnant naturally if we keep going this rate. And to be honest, if
Yeah,
we're
or
intervening
yeah, I
so
mean,
much.
it's just it's just gonna be more difficult, for kind of all of this stuff. But I mean, I don't necessarily think we'll get to a place where, I mean, who knows, sci-fi movies and stuff like that. But currently at this point, like cesarean, like cesarean rates and real fertility rates are somewhere around like 10 to 15%. So I mean, it's not a huge margin of the population. You know what I mean? I mean, it's significant, but it's not the majority or close to the majority at all. Will it take 300 years to get there? Will it take 500 years to get there? I don't know. Yeah.
Right. All right. I'm going to move on from the business of babies to the business of preventing babies. Birth control, contraceptives, things that we've done over history to our bodies just to prevent babies, like putting dung in our vaginas. I am going to be right back. I have to pee, but whoever wants to take this first, whoever wants to talk about one of the most absurd birth control methods they've found, I'll be right back.
Tara?
The most, I mean, Remy already said the most absurd one, which is putting actual animal feces in your vagina to stop pregnancy. What? This was a good idea. I need to talk to a manager because holy fucking shit.
Yeah, no idea. I guess at the time they had no idea like putting some like poop in your vagina could cause infections. I guess they never thought that.
Yeah.
What
No
culture
clue.
was this? Do you remember? Was this the Egyptian?
I think it was Egyptian
Yeah.
primarily. They did also have some decent methods of birth control because they were using actual plants. I can't remember the name of them right now, but they actually had spermicidal qualities to the plants that they were using. But this wasn't found out till like way further in time. But they were onto something sometime.
Yeah,
I
I
heard
mean,
you
there
talk.
is a rumor that this plant in like ancient Rome, Greece existed.
Yes.
That
Syphilum.
like that we literally like hunted to extinction for the purpose of like birth control. Like it doesn't exist anymore.
It's probably
and then
it's
the animal
probably
dung thing, it was
in like a fossilized like thing somewhere.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And the animal dung thing, it's my understanding that it was crocodile dung.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like there's a history of like doing kind of stuff like that for like medicinal purposes too, like different dungs and things like that. But it would be like dried and baked and things like that. And the only thing I can think of where like it legitimately might be something is like you know how they do like fecal transplants?
Yes. If you take too many
Yeah.
antibiotics.
Yeah, like if you have like C. diff or like too many antibiotics and you've messed up your gut biome like horribly, they'll literally take like a healthy person's stool, like a healthy person's poop, gut biome, and they'll literally like basically turn it into liquid, and then they'll give you like colonic, and it'll like reintroduce reintroduce like a good microbiome that can be established in your own gut. It's super cool, and like people are like always like, what? I don't want to do that, even though it's like
you want to take a pill of your partner's poo to cure you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's it's
so,
a pill. Oh my god.
Yeah.
So like that's the only thing I can think of in terms of like medicinal, where like maybe there's like some pH like microbiome issues in the the vagina, and so like that could be something. But that's the only thing I can think of.
I mean,
with like
if you're talking like a diaphragm, a cervical cap, you can use. Yeah. I'm sure dung is a great use to block the cervix. Also, like there's all sorts of stuff that we've used throughout the centuries for birth control. The ancient Egyptians used papyrus rolls, honey, and ackee leaves as a form of a cervical cap. They make it into a paste and push it up against their cervix.
Honey makes sense.
And I mean, it worked because they kept using it. Like, also, ancient Egyptians also found that breastfeeding causes you to as a form of contraception for at least 3 years, which I find amazing that they think that, because I don't think it's no.
Oh, it's not okay.
Is there science there? I don't think.
No, that's it's one of those like you won't get your period back for a while most of the time if you're exclusively breastfeeding. You won't get your period back for usually like 6 months to a year if you're exclusively breastfeeding. But that being said, you never know when your first period is coming. So you never know really when you're ovulating unless you're super familiar with your cervical mucus and like ovulatory symptoms and things like that. So unless you're like super into that, like you're never going to know when you're ovulating. So please don't use breastfeeding as a contraceptive.
I remember my doctor telling me that after I got pregnant, he's like, are you sure you want to be put back on the pill? You know, if you breastfeed, you won't get pregnant for at least the first year. I'm like,
what?
No, I have patients.
My doctor.
I mean, I have patients who are pregnant that still breastfeed their other child. You know what I mean? That like, I have patients who
great. Like it is. I don't care.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Who like, you know, they're breastfeeding their 2-year-old while they're breastfeeding their newborn at the same time. You know what I mean? Like I have patients doing that. And yeah, so breastfeeding is not contraceptive.
Yeah.
I was going to say. I do have to leave at 11, so I just wanted to add one thing into this.
Absolutely.
And that's like something that I think is really useful for people to know that almost nobody knows about. And it's an ovulatory saliva test. And it's super good for preventing pregnancy or getting pregnant. It's just a tool. It doesn't matter how you use it. Obviously, it's not 100%, but so like I wouldn't particularly rely on that. But people that are already relying on like pull out or the rhythm method or something like that, using this can just like help you, especially like get more familiar with like your cervical mucus and like tracking that. So like figuring out when you ovulate. And you can, they're super cheap. You can get them online. You can get them at like drugstores sometimes. And it looks like a little lipstick tube. It has a little lens in there that you like take a little drop of saliva from under your tongue. You put it on the lens, you let it dry, you screw it in, and there's a little light on the side, and you look at it like a little microscope. And when your cervical mucus changes, it's oftentimes people will notice it moves from more of like a clear thin to more of like an egg white consistency and color. And so that's called fertile mucus. Fertile mucus is what your body does to accept sperm. And so when you're right around ovulation, it'll make cervical mucus thicker and more basic so that it doesn't kill sperm and that it's better for motility.
Right. That's right.
And so getting pregnant without cervical fertile mucus is possible. It's just very difficult unless your partner has like a super high sperm count or something. And so just like your cervical mucus changes, your oral mucus changes too. And so what you can do, you put it on there, you let it dry. when you're not in that fertile window, it'll dry in kind of a stringy, chaotic pattern. When you are, it'll dry in like a fern pattern. It'll look like a ferning.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and that's actually like it's based on a traditional like birth control method too, where you literally like hawk a loogie on a window or something like that, let it dry in the sun, and then see how it dries.
Wow.
And then you can tell if you're fertile or not.
Wow, that is so basic and so
right.
like.
Yeah, and it's super easy, and like I encourage everybody to become like familiar with their cervical mucus, and there's plenty of resources online that can do that, because like you can learn a lot about your own health, a lot about like your cycle, a lot about kind of all sorts of stuff by just becoming like less intimidated by your own body.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That is interesting.
Yeah, and they're just called like saliva ovulatory tests. Yeah, and you can just buy them on Amazon. You can like, and they're super great to just keep around, and like, you're horny and you're like, hey, should we use something or not? Use this, see how your mucus is, like, see how your saliva's looking. If it looks like nothing,
Who's having sex now anyway? It's okay.
Well, some of us have partners that live with us.
I was gonna say sinners.
Okay, wow. Okay.
I love being a sinner, and don't you forget it. Well, I don't want to hold you up any longer, but thank you so much, Pat, for coming on. You've been super informal, and you're always welcome here at Thought Talk.
Yeah, let me know anytime.
It was nice meeting you, Pat.
Yeah, thanks. We learned a lot.
Awesome. That's what I'm here for.
Yes. And I will include links later in the show, so you guys can go check out Pat's band.